Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Payment Genes podcast series, Voices in Payments. Today, we are talking to Giesecke+Devrient about the future of payments and innovation. With us, we have Barnabás Ferenczi, the head of strategy and marketing, and Rüdiger Vogt, the head of Payments 4.0 business unit. Together, they have over 19 years of experience in Giesecke+Devrient and are key innovators within the payment industry. Throughout this series, we will be focusing on the future of payments, what is actionable within the next 2 to 3 years. Let's hear more about that. I'm your host, Diederik Klopper, and today I have with me Rüdiger Vogt and Barnabás Ferenczi. Both of you, a very warm welcome to this podcast series.
Hi, Diederik.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right, great to have you both on. Perhaps to give a short background of G&D, you have been around since 1852, went through a lot of crises in the past, but come out on top. Anything from Eurocheck to chip cards to mobile payments, card payments, and still keeping on innovating. Definitely something that we will focus on because here at Payment Genes as well, we'd like to focus on the future of payments. But perhaps to start off with a FinTech company founded in 1852. Barnabás, how does a company keep a level of innovation, forward thinking and future outlook within the company dynamics? I'm quite interested to hear a bit more about that.
A company like Giesecke has been around since many, many years, and the whole ecosystem around us had changed a lot. And here it's very important that we keep focus on our customers and the aspirations of our customers, who our customers want to become, what are their pain points, and what are their own business goals and development targets. And then we leverage our internal source of inspiration to develop solutions that take customers to the next level. And more recently, we also combine it with external sources of inspiration. For example, we are also partnering up with startups. We are even investing in startups with our newly founded ventures arm, or we develop partnerships with fintechs. So we also gather a lot of external sources of inspiration. Have focus on the needs of our customers and keep that focus along the way.
Yeah, indeed. It's sustainability and innovation. Of course, most of our listeners will also notice that there are quite some changes in the current way that we work. How did the whole COVID-19 situation, how did that influence the way of working with it in G&D, and how were you able as a manager to assist your teams in that?
So I think no one could really foresee and plan for the lockdown that happened more or less from 1 week to the next in many of our locations around the world. Just take Munich as an example, where we're headquartered. So within days, most employees were sent to home office. That was more than 1,000 people. And without any detailed instructions or pandemic dry runs, in real time. So from one day to another, everything still functioned. And from IT to customer communication and alignment processes, all the meetings, everything moved strictly online. And we even started doing Skype coffee meetings and attended virtual trade shows and conferences. So, but the question was, how can you prepare for this? Actually, I think you can prepare by instilling flexibility and an agile mindset in the organization, in everything you do, as we did for G&D. Because working virtually together requires discipline and mutual consideration. And I'm really impressed by the way the global team has excelled in both. And considering the unprecedented changes in our private and professional lives, my experience is that we have mastered them really well for this COVID crisis.
Yes. And of course, with the global coverage that G&D has, you have a ton of information as well, from localized governments to localized offices that you can tap into to perhaps track the progression of crises such as the COVID-19. But G&D has weathered a few storms already. How do you best capitalize on the accessibility to that information to make sure that you can formulate well-informed decisions on that?
like all global companies, we have followed very closely the local authorities and also global health organizations like the WHO in terms of what is happening in the crisis and what are the precautions and health measures that we need to take. Being a global company means also that we are very open to different perspectives and different dynamics, because as we all know, the Corona crisis had different dynamics in Asia, than in Europe, than in North America. And you have to be always prepared and make sure you understand that in the current situation, there are different challenges for your customers on the east or on the west side of the world. And having teams both on east and west side of the world makes you being very open, and you appreciate and understand the changes your customers going through right now.
Yeah. And Barnabás, you as head of strategy and marketing with full global coverage, how do you differentiate the approach for each specific region where perhaps the impact will vastly differ from one to another in order to best tailor fit it to the current situation on the ground?
At Giesecke, we combine a central approach in having know-how sharing and experience sharing with local touch. So we set up for such situations like the COVID crisis a central task force that helps to manage both the human aspects as well as the business aspects. And we listen very carefully to what our local colleagues say about the local conditions and local customers. And we tailor make our solutions in terms of logistics or in terms of making the technology solutions adjusted for the specific local situations. For example, there were countries where it became very difficult to send people to bank branches to pick up their cards. So together with the bank customer, we could adjust, knowing that and understanding that, the whole logistics model so that people get their new bank cards at home. And there is a lot of examples around that. So it's very important that you combine central innovation and know-how about business processes and technology with the local touch of listening and understanding your customer needs locally.
Yeah, and I know one of your key mottos is there's more to the customer than meet the eye, and it's also about developing new propositions. I can imagine as well that this new delivery, for instance, the way of delivering cards to the customers is also quite customer friendly. Is it something that you plan on keeping on doing in the future, or is it something that once everything's back to normal, you get back to the old ways?
In such a crisis like the COVID, we all discover very fast new ways of working and new ways of doing business. And it was amazing to see how fast banking and payments have become digital all around the world, and how new business routines have developed very rapidly in terms of how you onboard your customers, how you authenticate your customers, how you manage your card with your customers, how you manage your contact with your customers. And this is what we took as the most important learning from the crisis, that innovation and digitalization happens fast under such circumstances. And in this regard, we are very positive that both our banks, our end customers, the cardholders, and also we as company learned a lot in the crisis. So we'll definitely keep a lot of the new processes and innovations that we implemented during the crisis for the future.
Yes. And question for both Rudy and Barnabás. As senior management, you are tasked with making sure that the long-term vision of the organization is taken care of. Of course, these kind of crises ask for a lot of stepping in on a more operational level. So in what way or in what sense do you allow your vision to shift from long-term to more short-term, perhaps even the next 2 quarters to the current day-to-day operations, and still make sure that the team works to the most efficient ways?
Well, maybe I can answer that one as the non-strategy guy, looking also at the strategy and the long-term focus. So Barnabás will like that. I think we have a very good long-term strategy in place with our DNA as the basis, creating confidence. But when it comes to situations like COVID, your customers and the whole organization really demand your short-term focus on that. So there's a lot of issues that have to be solved from 1 week or even 1 day to the next, and where you need to come up with creative solutions. And I was talking before about this agile environment that we work in order to be creative in such situations. And we came up with really good solutions, going from more physical world, like the meetings that I talked about, to digital alignments, and even processes from signatures to approval processes and everything that was involved in this. So therefore, I think we have in a very short time really achieved a bigger change in the operations and in our processes, where quite some of this we will keep and take into the future, and even make that part of our overall strategy. And we have also identified new areas that have been emerging for our development, that before we did not maybe see as clearly, and that because of the crisis have become much more evident.
And I can imagine as well that at these times there are a lot of different aspects and a lot of different processes that will come up that will need adjustment. How do you prioritize which one is most urgent? And do you have any examples of various things coming towards you and having being forced to make a decision? And how do you weigh them against each other?
I can share maybe as principle that it's very important to have a longer term vision, because unexpected things will always happen. And these are like when you're sailing or driving a boat, these are the little waves that bump against your boat, and they can give a bump in this or that direction. But if you have a clear vision in which direction you want to drive your boat, that helps a lot in terms of prioritizing resources.
So is it as well that once a situation like COVID-19, the breakout becomes more substantial, that you guys as senior manager sit together, everybody, to redefine the vision, to re-emphasize on that? Or is it something that's always has been a constant and you just instantly know how to act upon that?
I think for every company in a very serious industry like payments and banking, it's very important to keep the principles on the radar when you react to a short-term crisis or challenge. And the principles are that you have to maintain security, you have to enable your customers to be able to use payment solutions in a secure way. And this is what we have been doing since many years. And in this regard, this is also our driving logic. We help during also the crisis that our customers, primarily commercial banks, they are able to serve their clients in a secure way with payment solutions that also creates a good customer experience. And that principle doesn't change during a crisis. Of course, you have to be very fast in terms of how you react to challenges in implementing this principle. Let it be card manufacturing, or how you deliver the cards to your customers, or how you replace a previously physical process with a digital one. But the principles are the same, I would say.
Yeah, indeed. And then perhaps to change a bit towards a more the future perspective, because like we already discussed, these unfortunate times also are a key driver for innovation. In your experience, the changes in the past few months, what new possibilities have they opened with regards to services, products, solutions that we can expect to enter the market or become more popular in the next year or two?
Let me answer that one. So you can just take contactless payment, for example. This is not a really new technology, but driven by the COVID situation, public awareness and the acceptance by merchants has gone up significantly. So, for example, a recent report from MasterCard shows how contactless adoption is becoming the new normal, with almost 80% of the transactions across Europe now being contactless. And the main reasons for that are simplicity and the cleanliness of this solution. And in
Something
addition,
we've been used to in the Netherlands already for quite a few years.
Absolutely, but I keep using that example of the bakery where for many years, although I had a contactless card, I could never use it. And after COVID lockdown, within 2 weeks, they were all set up, right? And they have a
Yes.
point of sale now that accepts contactless cards. So and they, by the way, they didn't even accept cards before. So so that's how this whole environment is changing. And I think that also the fact, of course, that the spending limits for contactless have been raised in many countries within the last couple of weeks, that has ordered that has really helped people all over the place to benefit from this way of paying, and then also being very active in the payments with wearables. We know that the sale, for example, of watches with payment functionality has significantly gone up since the pandemic started, and also a lot of people now start to adopt the mobile phone for payment much more than before, and the mobile contactless transactions have doubled in Europe just in Q1. And then another effect of the quarantine measures is that the online sales, of course, have become more popular during the last months. And in this context, with the recent incidents in the news, securing sensitive customer data has also moved more into the focus. And I think at G&D Mobile Security, we have identified these market trends longer time ago already, and we prepared with dedicated products and services. But as Barnabás has said before, now we see really how strongly this is being accelerated, this whole digital trend with the COVID situation.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed, it's once you have to change, people will change. And like I mentioned, here in the Netherlands, we've seen contactless payments and as well payments through, for example, Apple Pay has been widely accepted. And whenever I travel abroad, whenever I come to a store where it's not possible to pay by card, I'm always a bit frustrated and flabbergasted that we have to go back in time for my feeling to cash payment. But on the other hand, as well, there's a very good reason that those payment options are still there today, and I think as well that it's quite within your company a culture and vision that to have the choices available. But these kind of strange times do change the way that people choose to pay. Do you see a lot of these differences lasting in the foreseeable future, or do you think that most will go back to normal as well?
We think that during such a crisis, new habits are formed. So people who never paid by contactless card in the bakery may pay now because they have a positive experience around it. A lot of new customer groups, a lot of new consumer groups have become accustomed to online e-commerce now, because in many countries lockdown was so severe that e-commerce was probably the only way to maintain your consumption habits. And we think that the groups that experience now new forms of payments in a positive way, they will keep using such payment forms. So along the industry analysts, we also expect that contactless payments in store, that online payments in the e-commerce space, they are here to stay. What remains very important is to combine the availability of the different payment methods to enable choice for the consumers, to provide security. So each payment choice has to be done in a secure way, and also that the consumer experience has to be very positive. And that's really what we stand for, and we aim at, to combine high level of security with a great user experience.
Perhaps going back a bit towards the global coverage that you guys are having, and having the main advantage of seeing a lot of developments on perhaps a smaller scale and localized markets. Are there any specific developments that you see all across the world that you think will have a really profound global impact?
Well, I would say let's take an example. For example, China. So G&D is active in this market for many years, and we have a key position there in the payment space. So we started out with Magstripe cards serving most major local banks, and then moving to chip technology, and then on to digital solution. But we're very excited to see how our Chinese colleagues are shaping the future roadmap, and that is the global future roadmap with an innovation lead of typically 1 or 2 years ahead of other regions. So, for example, wearable payment projects were introduced there first, and G&D even created a full payment ecosystem for the biggest gas station in China. And now we have introduced a do-it-yourself payment card. So bank clients are using a smartphone app, for example, via WeChat, and create their own card design. These are trends that have started in China, and that we've then taken into our R&D also for our global clients. And then looking into the future, paying with QR codes and digital P2P apps, they were also first introduced in larger scale in China with WeChat and Alipay. And my expectation is that we will soon see a much more widespread adoption of similar solutions also in Europe.
The QR codes which you mentioned have already tried and sort of been tested in Europe, for instance, but haven't really had the success that perhaps people were expecting. Could it be related to the fact, for instance, that contactless payments is now really taking off in collaboration with the whole COVID-19 section, that perhaps there needs to be an external driver for QR codes to be as widely adopted as perhaps it already has been in China?
I think it's definitely that there is a need for a driver to accelerate this indeed, and COVID can be such a driver. But also at the same time, again, you need to see that China typically is a bit ahead of the curve there, and I mean, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, people were using contactless keychains to do payment there. For example, when the contactless infrastructure was not even up here in Europe, right? So I think we will see this with a certain time lag, also because the user experience needs to be, of course, seamless and needs to be then also nicely integrated into the existing apps. Yeah.
I find this is a very good example for also the importance of innovation solving pain points. Because in Europe and in some other regions of the world, there was already a very strong legacy infrastructure. Like you mentioned, Diederik, in terms of in Holland being able to pay with your card everywhere from morning till evening. So there is a very strong infrastructure both on merchant side with POS terminals and also on bank side and cardholder side. So the real pain point for the different stakeholders like consumers, merchants, or banks was not actually around the access point. Or the access device, or how I pay. In China, there was a lack of a widespread POS infrastructure, although it's a market with a huge, more than 7 billion payment cards, but the POS infrastructure was very slowly catching up. And this has created a pain point, and it created an inspiration for innovation to leapfrog that development, like with contactless card, and to move directly into QR codes. I think in Europe also there is a lot of innovative energy, but probably this energy will go into different fields and dimensions because the pain points are different.
If you could shortly explain how the DIY card works, it's purely a consumer card, right? The DIY card. So the consumer can modify it to his or her liking.
And that's the beauty of it, that you as an end consumer can actually modify the card and design the card to your liking in an app. And that basically gives you an individual card once you go through the app process.
Fully customized to my liking.
Exactly, and it's the only card that exists with this exact design, because you did it yourself.
And is it then as well some possibilities for advertisement for companies that say, hey, I will give you a discount in my store if you, for instance, use my brand on your card?
I don't think we have thought about this yet, but this is definitely something to think about.
Yeah, great idea. And by the way, this is also happening in closed loop ecosystems. So where a merchant is the one who is behind the cards, And actually, this is also something that we more and more introduce in mega markets in Asia, like in China and in the Philippines, where large merchants have an interest to manage a payment system within the merchant space. Of course, we also know it in Europe from IKEA card and these kind of things. And this is really where a merchant can emphasize the bond between merchant and consumer. Regarding the do-it-yourself card, I think we also see a combination of two trends here. One is that as individuum, we want to express what values we stand for. I am an eco person, then I'm wearing things that represent my eco thinking, or I am very proud of my success as a businessman, then I have maybe VIP status things around me. And that leads to the trend that also the payment cards become lifestyle objects. So we want to express our values. So we are working on solutions with metal cards for the VIP feeling. We are working on solutions with eco materials that represent that the consumer cares about the environment. And also here, it coincides with the trend that the banks are feeling. Banks, especially now with all these difficult economic conditions, they need to have a very strong bond between them and the cardholders, their end customers. And if the banks support that the card can become a lifestyle object, then this is a very strong bond. And the bank meets the consumer also at the level of values and lifestyle, and not only at the level of finance behavior or purchasing behavior.
It's something as well that we with Payment see with our clients, that they are as well still looking into issuing cards, even from a merchant's perspective, with multiple use cases. It could be marketing, it could be loyalty, but indeed conversion increasement. But it's still something that we see in Europe quite strong, but it's still on a global scale. This is happening.
Absolutely. There will be a lot of changes coming to the cards space, driven by such trends in terms of personalization, in terms of looking into strong customer bonding and customer attachment, and also due to innovation that now we can make a card fully, except for, of course, the chip and antenna of eco-friendly materials. That is possible that the customer has a nearly 100% eco-friendly card in their hand. That we can also make a metal card combined with contactless function, which is a technical challenge a few years back, and that is working in all these contactless environments. And this is very important because when I want to use as consumer my card as a lifestyle statement, on the other hand, I don't want to compromise my values or the use case. So
Yeah,
technical
exactly.
innovation and these value-based consumer trends, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, there must be indeed an improvement in the UX in order to make sense to implement it. But indeed, payment cards as MetroCards are, for instance, for the London Underground, but as well, we've been struggling here in the Netherlands as well with the OV chip card, with really getting it up to speed and making it super user friendly. We're still not quite there yet, so there's level for innovation. So if you can speak to the Dutch government, please feel free to do so.
We can say there is a lot more to the card than meets the eye. The card has a great future in the currently known use cases, but also if you go to examples you mentioned, Diederik, like transport, like combining identity management with the payment function, or closed loop ecosystems where you have special benefits. So the card has a lot of potential in this regard that we can still leverage.
Yes. And one other thing that I was quite curious about, and Rudy, perhaps you have some interesting insights here, is as the payment landscape is, of course, global, but as well very localized with specific payment methods that are unique to each and every region. How do you make the decision whether you should implement them in your product portfolio, or you will just get a too scattered portfolio of all the different payment methods? What are some of the main decisions that you will need to take in that aspect?
Well, first of all, I mean, we don't create our portfolio based on features per se. So we're doing our solution roadmap based on customer needs and how to add value in everyday life. Just like we just talked about, use case driven, like for example, pay frictionless online, but knowing that with a G&D solution, you're secured, or shop at a farmer's market using your fingerprint instead of a PIN to verify your card transaction. So things like these that simplify the act of payment are what we typically look at. With Payment 4.0, we address a growth market that consists of fintechs, neobanks, and aggregators such as payment processors. And many of the end customer needs these players are serving are very similar around the globe. That's why you see them on the rise in many countries currently. And for these needs, we develop our solutions, sometimes with a local flavor, but always with global execution in mind. And just to add to the example of the metal card, so we're constantly looking at how to enrich the payment situation and the user experience. And for example, with the fintech in Canada, we have launched a metal card. On the one hand, this is a clear fashion statement, so you can even hear the difference when dropping the card on the counter, right? So that's the whole idea behind. But on the other hand, it is bundled with services such as real-time feedback on the prepaid account activity via an app for cost control. So this means being both cool and making a strong statement when paying, but at the same time having sustainable consumer behavior in mind. And at the end of the day, it's all about enabling a satisfying customer experience, regardless of online, offline, with a physical card, mobile wallet, or wearable. And that's basically what we're addressing. Again, like I said, with a global focus from a platform perspective, but with a local flavor that we can implement.
Yes. And then we talked about cards, QR, peer-to-peer, digital commerce. So many options that are currently existing in the market. But yeah, looking towards the future, and then let's talk practically in that, in the sense of 2 to 3 years, and not 10 to 15 years where it's a full biometric scan or chip implant that will allow frictionless payments. But what are some of the recent developments that you guys are seeing on a global scale that you're most excited about?
Well, I'll give you two examples that I'm really excited about. I mean, based on what we outlined already, that there's a strong need to combine convenience and security for remote authentication. And G&D has developed a solution where a consumer can use the contactless payment card they already have in combination with their mobile phone to authorize, for example, bank transfers or online payments. And we call this Convigo Tap because you tap your card to the mobile phone. Mm-hmm. And you can also use it to activate or enter into your mobile banking app or to activate a new payment card. And that to me is a really great example about how you create a wonderful user experience, combining a technology that's already out there plus a new innovation that's being driven by us. The other example that I would like to mention is we see really an increasing need to secure sensitive consumer data that is being used in e-commerce transactions. And here the technology of tokenizing customer-related sensitive information stored at merchants and thereby making it useless for hackers, basically, is very important. So we're using our long expertise in the field of secured payments or through this tokenization technology. And with this, we're now addressing this need for security.
Exactly, yeah. But perhaps to start off, touch on the first point that you mentioned. So combining the contactless card with the mobile phone. Is it something as well? We see a lot of developments on the field of mobility with shared car services, companies like Tier Mobility with the small scooters. Is it as well possible that the software that will be then on the phone will be implemented in either the car or the scooter, and you can use the card in that way to make payments?
Sure. I mean, we're already talking about in-car payments these days, and I would not be surprised to see this also being integrated in other mobility solutions. Of course, I mean, in terms of the form factor, in terms of the functionality, that is absolutely possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and the second one you mentioned, the security, and especially then focused on tokenization. It's of course one of the buzzwords that everybody's talking about. Perhaps every now and then it makes sense to take a step back, and as well for those who are not that familiarized with the landscape, can you just shortly explain in layman's terms what does it mean, tokenization?
Well, tokenization basically means that the information, the clear information, so to speak, that is on your cards or your primary account number in particular, is being modified into a token that can be used for payment, but that if you just have this token, you will not be able to execute a payment. So basically, this information, like I said, would be useless to make a payment online in a regular way, so to speak.
So it's translating the payment data into code language that can only be deciphered by the others who know the code.
Exactly. It's an encrypted way of transporting the information. Yeah.
Yes. So in that sense, very secure as well.
Cryptographic translation, and it makes e-commerce payments, mobile payments, digital wallet-based payments with the mobile phone very secure.
Yes. All right. So mobile, contactless, and secure payments, those are the things to look out for in the future, in the foreseeable future.
Absolutely, in the foreseeable future. And then if you want to go further, but that would be another podcast, we can of course talk about things like central bank-backed digital currencies, so future-proof digital payment solutions that G&D as a group is also working on, and we are in discussions currently with central banks globally and preparing the first pilots on that. Also, I mean, you talked about transportation, but we're also looking at e-government solutions. So making the whole process of, for example, renewing your passport much more user-friendly, and of course also securing IT infrastructure is on top of our agenda. And we will also see more secure biometric solutions in the future, whether we're talking about authentication with your face or voice on the mobile phone, or with the fingerprint on a payment card, right? So these are all trends that we are actively driving, where we're spending a lot of time and effort in terms of developing new solutions. But again, like I said, I mean, these are every one of these points would be a podcast on its own, I think.
But that gives food for thought, and I think I will hold you to it that indeed we will touch upon one of these topics in the future, if you're willing to, because
sure.
Both Barnabás and Rudy, I must say that I really enjoyed this podcast, and I would like to thank you very much for contributing. And yes, we look forward to seeing these developments in the near future.
Thank you, Diederik.
Thank you, right back. Our pleasure. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. And this was it for this week's podcast. And we'll see you next week. The Voices in Payments podcast is an initiative launched by Payment Genes, aimed at positively impacting the payments community by educating and connecting the market with vertical-specific industry expertise. We as Payment Genes empower the industry by focusing on the fundamentals for business growth. We achieve this by providing industry-leading payments recruitment, business and data strategy consulting services. Check out paymentgenes.com for more info, and please follow us on social media for more jobs, company updates, industry insights, and more.